One of the oldest documented medicines in the world is not locked away in a pharmacy. It is not expensive, it is not rare, and it does not require a prescription. It is sitting right now in 2 jars on your kitchen shelf: honey and vinegar. Together they make something the Greeks called oxymel, 2 ingredients that Hippocrates was already prescribing 25 centuries ago, and that modern science is only just beginning to understand. Welcome to Good Gut Feeling. I'm genuinely glad you're here. Today we take a different kind of walk together. No shopping list, no pickling crock. Just a book, a quiet afternoon, and one question that has followed me around ever since I started fermenting. How did humans figure all of this out? Long before they knew bacteria even existed. This is a space for curiosity and for the slow kind of learning. In the next 16 minutes or so, we are going to trace one unbroken line from Hippocrates and his theory of the 4 humors, through medieval herbalists and their kitchen apothecaries, all the way to the polyphenol microbiota axis and the gut-brain connection. And along the way, I will share a simple recipe for an oxymel, the classical honey and vinegar preparation, so that the oldest medicine in the world can quite literally live on your shelf. The oldest natural remedies were never invented in a lab. They came out of the kitchen and the garden. To understand why 2 jars from your kitchen can be called medicine, we have to go back about 2,500 years. Before Hippocrates, disease was mostly seen as a spiritual matter. Punishment from the gods, bad air, sinful living. Healing meant rituals, not recipes. Around 500 BCE, Hippocrates and his students made a quiet revolution. They said, very carefully, that diseases have natural causes, that the body is a structure, with functions, with fluids, with balance, and that a physician is someone who observes, predicts, and gently intervenes. Out of this grew the theory of the 4 humors: blood, yellow bile, black bile, and phlegm. Health was balance between them, what the Greeks called eukrasia. Disease was imbalance, dyskrasia. The words sound ancient, but the underlying idea that health is a dynamic equilibrium is something you will recognize in every modern nutrition textbook. Fast forward 1,000 years, and this Greek knowledge travels east, through Persia and the Arab world, and becomes the foundation of Unani medicine. It travels west, through Galen and the Byzantine Empire, into medieval Europe. And in 1600s England, a herbalist named Nicholas Culpeper does something remarkable. He translates medical knowledge from Latin into English so that ordinary households can grow, pick, and prepare their own remedies. Juniper berries for fluid retention, marshmallow root for inflammation, linseed for coughs. What connects all of these traditions is a simple idea, that the kitchen and the garden just outside it is the first pharmacy. The star of this old pharmacy, the preparation built on apple cider vinegar and honey, is called oxymel. In Greek, oxy for sour and meli for honey. In Persian medicine, it is known as sekinjabin. Hildegard von Bingen praised it in the 12th century. Hippocrates prescribed it in his work on acute diseases, more than 2,000 years ago. For a long time, science assumed that honey and vinegar were only there to make bitter herbs drinkable, a sweet and sour disguise. Modern research has turned that idea completely upside down. Raw honey, on its own, is already a remarkable substance. It has an extremely high sugar concentration, which pulls water out of bacterial cells. It has a low pH, which inhibits bacterial growth. It slowly releases hydrogen peroxide. Raw honey also carries its own living microbiome, around 40 strains of lactic acid bacteria from the bees themselves. Vinegar brings acetic acid. Acetic acid can penetrate the outer layer of bacteria and lower their internal pH, which halts their metabolism. On its own, already effective. But when you combine them, something else happens. In chronic wounds and stubborn infections, bacteria form what scientists call biofilms, a thick, slimy fortress that resists antibiotics. Honey alone cannot penetrate it. Vinegar alone cannot penetrate it. Together, they can. The acetic acid breaks open the biofilm, and the osmotic and enzymatic components of the honey flood into the deeper layers. Even notoriously resistant pathogens, like Pseudomonas aeruginosa, can be affected. The Ancient Biotics Project at the University of Nottingham analyzed 40 medieval manuscripts. In recipes for wounds and infections, honey, vinegar, and oxymel appeared 151 times. Garlic, by comparison, showed up 9 times. Medieval healers, long before microscopes, had figured out which combinations actually worked. And today, laboratory studies are quietly confirming it. This is where apple cider vinegar and gut health stop being a wellness slogan and start being chemistry, because the same logic that protects a wound also protects a gut wall. Plants make substances called polyphenols. They are responsible for the color of blueberries, the bitterness of green tea, the depth of rosemary. For decades, we mostly valued them as antioxidants. And they are antioxidants, but that is almost the smallest part of their story. Here is the paradox. In a test tube, polyphenols look like superheroes. In a human body, only about 5 to 10% of them are absorbed in the small intestine. For a long time, this was considered a disappointment. If they are not absorbed, how can they work? The answer is simple and beautiful. 90% of those polyphenols travel all the way to the colon, where your gut microbiota is waiting. Your gut bacteria carry a genome that is about 100 times larger than your own, with an enormous library of enzymes. These bacteria break the polyphenols apart, cut away the sugar groups, and transform them into smaller, much more bioavailable molecules: aglycones, phenolic acids, and specific metabolites. One example: allagitannins from pomegranates and berries are converted by specific gut bacteria into something called urolithin A. Urolithin A is far more bioavailable than the original molecule. It also stimulates mitophagy, the body's natural way of cleaning up damaged mitochondria, which protects against cellular aging and neurodegeneration. So the real active ingredient is not what you put in your mouth. It is what your gut makes out of it. And this brings us to the fourth part of the story, the gut-brain axis. The gut and the brain are not separate systems. They talk to each other constantly through the vagus nerve, through immune signals, through hormones, and through the metabolites of your microbiome. When the gut wall is strong, when the microbiota is diverse, when the lactic acid bacteria are thriving, the system runs smoothly. Inflammation stays low. Tight junctions stay tight. The gut-brain conversation is calm. When the gut wall is damaged, which can happen with a diet high in refined sugar and fat, bacterial endotoxins can slip into the bloodstream. That low-grade inflammation then reaches the brain, where it influences mood, cognition, and even appetite. In 2021, a groundbreaking study from Stanford Medicine showed something remarkable. People who ate fermented foods every day, things like kefir, kombucha, sauerkraut, yogurt with live cultures, vinegars with the mother, saw 2 measurable changes in their blood within 10 weeks. More microbial diversity in their gut and less systemic inflammation, not through expensive supplements, through food. This is the thread that runs from Hippocrates all the way to the Stanford lab. Living food, a balanced gut, a calmer body. The same intuition with a new vocabulary. Let me take a moment to slow down and explain what is actually happening here, because once you understand it, the rest of this episode falls into place. Imagine a polyphenol molecule, bound to a sugar group, floating down through your digestive tract. It cannot be absorbed easily through the small intestine because it is too large and too tightly bound. So it keeps going all the way to the colon. In the colon, your gut bacteria are waiting with a full set of enzymes. They cut the sugar off. What remains is a small, free molecule called an aglycone. That aglycone slips through the gut wall into the bloodstream and begins to do very specific things. It interacts with a protein pathway called KEAP1-NRF2, which activates your body's own antioxidant enzymes. It blocks the toll-like receptor 4 pathway, which calms down inflammation. And it binds to glucose transporters on your gut wall, slowing the absorption of sugar after a meal. The gut bacteria are not just breaking down your food. They are tuning your metabolism, your immune system, and your nervous system through the metabolites they produce. This is why a varied diet matters so much more than any single superfood. Diversity of plants feeds diversity of microbes, and diversity of microbes creates the widest possible library of these protective molecules. Now, after all that science, let us come back into the kitchen and actually make something. This oxymel recipe is one of the simplest preparations you can make. 2 ingredients, 1 jar, a little patience. You will need 200 grams 7 ounces of raw, unpasteurized honey. Raw is important because the living enzymes and bacteria are part of what makes this work. 100 milliliters, 3.4 fluid ounces of raw apple cider vinegar, the kind with the cloudy mother at the bottom of the bottle, unfiltered, unpasteurized. And optionally, a small handful of fresh or dried herbs, about 10 grams, 0.35 ounces. Thyme is beautiful for respiratory support. Rosemary brings depth and a touch of bitterness. Sage, elderberry, or ginger all work well too. You will also need 1 clean glass jar of around 500 milliliters, 17 fluid ounces, with a lid that seals well. If you use a metal lid, place a small piece of baking paper between the lid and the vinegar, because acetic acid and metal do not mix well over time. Rinse your jar in hot water and let it air dry. No chemicals, no soap residue. Live cultures are sensitive. If you're using herbs, place them in the bottom of the jar. Bruise them lightly with the back of a spoon to release their oils. Pour the honey over the herbs, followed by the vinegar. Close the jar and shake gently until the honey begins to dissolve. It will not mix completely at first, and that is fine. Store the jar in a dark, cool place, not the fridge. Shake it once a day for the first week, then once every few days. After 2 to 4 weeks, the honey and vinegar will have fully married, and the herbs will have given up their essential compounds into the liquid. Strain the liquid through a fine cloth into a clean bottle. Compost the herbs. Your oxymel will keep for at least 6 months in a cool, dark cupboard, and it only gets more complex with age. As for dosage, a teaspoon 5 milliliters in a small glass of warm water once or twice a day is a good place to start. You can also use it as a salad dressing base or as a gentle sore throat remedy in hot water with a slice of lemon. This is a food and a traditional preparation. It is not a replacement for medical care, and if you are pregnant, on medication, or living with a chronic condition, please check with your doctor first. Before we close, 3 things from this episode that I want to leave with you. First, synergy almost always beats isolation. Honey alone, vinegar alone, a single polyphenol alone. None of these are as powerful as the combinations that traditional cultures develop by observation, and that modern science is rediscovering through data mining. Second, your gut is the translator. The real medicine is not what you swallow, it is what your microbiota makes out of it. Which means feeding your gut well is the most important act of care in your day. Third, fermentation is not just preservation, it is pre-digestion. Lactic acid bacteria do chemical work that your own body cannot do, breaking bonds, freeing molecules, multiplying the biological availability of plants by orders of magnitude. 1 old medicine, 3 quiet revolutions. If this story feels familiar to some of you, that is because we have already walked part of this path together. In our episode on fermented garlic honey, we fermented raw garlic cloves in raw honey and watched the flavor transform over weeks. What we were doing there, without naming it, was exactly the process this episode describes. The osmotic pressure of the honey, combined with the natural lactic acid bacteria on the garlic, creating a slow, controlled lactofermentation, breaking down the organosulfur compounds into something the gut can actually absorb. The oxymelt we just made is a close cousin of that garlic honey, with vinegar taking over part of the extraction work. Same principle, different tool. Honey as a carrier, acid as a solvent, time as a teacher. If you want to experience the full synergy, make both. Let them sit side by side on your shelf. One sweet, one sour. And notice over the months how your kitchen slowly turns into the kind of small apothecary that Culpeper and Hildegard would have recognized immediately. So there it is, one of the oldest medicines in the world sitting in 2 jars on your shelf, connected by a single honey-colored thread to Hippocrates, Culpeper, Persian physicians, Stanford researchers, and the bacteria in your own gut. The kitchen has been the first pharmacy for a very long time. It still is. All it asks is a little attention, a little patience, and a willingness to trust what living food can do. If this episode made you see your honey jar a little differently, I'd love it if you like this video and subscribe to Good Gut Feeling. And consider leaving a comment with the oldest remedy in your own family. A grandmother's cough syrup, a neighbor's wound poultice, a recipe scribbled in a kitchen notebook. Those stories are the real Ancient Biotics database. Thank you for being here. Until next time, take good care of yourself, inside and out.